Welcome to Roadcast, a visual blog dedicated to highlighting and amplifying creative endeavors in design, art, and innovation. This June, Roadcast had the opportunity to attend the Innovative Housing Showcase in Washington, D.C. We sat down with some of the leading entrepreneurs in housing to tour their prototype homes. Hosted by Secretary Fudge and the National Association of Home Builders on the National Mall, the event featured building technologies and housing solutions that are making housing more innovative, resilient, and affordable for American families. A big shout out to Diggs, LSW Architects, and PathHouse for sponsoring this series. We hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you down the road.
All right, so this is the PathHouse.
There you go.
Here
Welcome,
it is.
Jake.
Let's take a tour.
All right, thanks for coming in. After you.
All right.
So one thing fascinating about CLT is that it's the newest building material really in North America. It landed on our shores about 12 years ago now, and it's compressed wood into thicker panels. So it's using smaller dimensional lumber and aggregating that to become one piece of solid wood. What used to be, let's just say 5,000 pieces, meaning studs, insulation, drywall, tape, mud, screws, now is one. So what used to be, let's just say 40,000 pieces is now 6. So in an assembly line process, we'll be just assembling 4 sides and a top and bottom. What used to be 10,000 labor points and failure points.
So naturally, like when I hear, all right, these are being manufactured, there's 6 of these panels, however many of these panels we're using, but you're not running electrical through them, you're not running HVAC, plumbing, and so maybe talk us through some of the different things that you've created here design-wise. I mean, we're looking through the floor here. Talk us through what that looks like, how it puts together.
Thanks, Jake. So much like we were talking about earlier in Henry Ford, the chassis and the dashboard coming together. The chassis, again, is the CLT manufactured panelized walls, and then we'll be working on this cassette and removing costs from that equation as often and for as long as we can, right? Just keep removing costs. So when you start to put HVAC systems, this is a heat pump shown in this glass viewing window. We also have a vacuum formed plastic liner. One of my favorite things about this is actually the fact that anywhere a flood happens in a PathHouse unit, the water from a dishwasher, for an overflowing sink or a shower or the washing machine goes into these drains and then leaves the building and never can flood the unit below, because that's a vacuum formed plastic basin essentially. And then with the electrical distribution, what we really love is that, and again, this is all in the bottom 10 inches, so we've removed, as you say, switching and conduit from the equation, and we've built with these little cartridge style outlets that the homeowner can move to different locations.
Oh, nice.
So for where you put these outlets, where you need an outlet.
Just slide them in.
And then at the last minute in our designing phase of this kind of prototype, we realized that you can also hang it upside down.
Oh, I love
so
it.
all of your transformers, the ugly things from your phones and your televisions
Can just be under.
It was all hidden, and all you have is then a cord coming up wherever you want that cord to come up.
I love it.
And so that's the electrical distribution. What's nice about this vent is it's not only acting as electrical distribution, it's also acting as the incoming and outgoing air, both fresh air and heated and cooled air.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a drain, it's electrical distribution, and it's the venting system, which is, again, achieved in this channel. We don't do conduit anymore because we're at that adjacent possible moment where we don't need to do conduit anymore, because this switch turns on and off the light that's associated with that particular outlet.
Oh yeah, you've got this, yeah.
It's actually, so you can actually now take the switch with you, which is kind of fascinating, and you can program where these switches go to which outlet. So
it's a great illustration of the technology, like you're saying, adjacent to it, that's allowing for these, like, instead of wondering like, how am I going to punch a hole in this wall
and route it all out and cover it, and all that expense now is disappeared.
Yeah.
And this only has been around for about 2 years. So these things are really coming together fortuitously for us to crack the nut of providing affordable housing. The funding in this country is there. the understanding that we have two major crises, climate change, of course, and housing. And as you know, Jake, we're trying to use the climate change problem to solve the housing problem by thinning our forests, reducing forest fires, sequestering carbon, and then use that panel to solve the housing crisis. So the federal government looks at it as eating from their own kitchen. That's the term they keep using. Because if we can really achieve this goal of 50,000 a year, that would be about 200 million board feet of sequestered carbon and a deep lean in on the supply side of housing.
We have a responsibility. You know, we can't just turn a blind eye, and so I wanted to look at different ways that we can design and build buildings. The answers are in front of us. They've been around for millennia, for centuries. They're underneath our feet. We just have to be a little bit more humble and recognize that we can use these materials in a different way. And CLT, mass timber, is an example of that. Using a material in a slightly different way with advanced technology, advanced manufacturing. Now you're using smaller diameter logs to basically laminate them together to create these panels where you don't have to cut large, trees, old growth of trees, right, that are doing really, really important ecosystem work, ecosystem services, biodiversity, cleaning the air, and now some of these things that we're learning about all the underground network in terms of what the soil is doing in terms of, so all these things are important. And to me, it's a great way of kind of tying the natural environment to the built environment, really connecting our cities, our concrete jungles, to our natural forests, and then also tying that to some of the housing challenges that we're seeing. I'm down in Los Angeles and in Portland. You see it literally on the streets in terms of, and even the people that can afford housing, it's just becoming more and more out of reach, even just for the average American. So it's going in the wrong direction, and we want to try to help reverse that and address that from a housing point of view, and then also tackle it from a climate point of view. And we think PathHouse and CLT and mass timber is a great way of kind of linking those two together, really connecting the dots. Wood is, I think, for a long time been overlooked. It's been around forever. It's a simple material, and I think through modernity, as we've evolved to be more modern, we wanted to look at newer materials, concrete, steel, glass. But I think now we're starting to see what some of those implications are, and now we're starting to kind of go back and look at wood is actually one of the most technologically advanced materials that we have. Just what it can do, taking photosynthesis, the tree absorbing carbon dioxide, giving off oxygen that we breathe. The forests are literally the lungs of our planet. And it's one of the most efficient. I mean, solar panels are essentially trying to replicate what a leaf does, right? Transferring through photosynthesis. And it takes essentially the air, the carbon dioxide, and it pumps it into the fiber of the wood. So you're locking that carbon in the wood. So there's a really great story there. And that is really what drove me to PathHouse, and also just trying to solve some of these challenges at a scale, because it's not enough to just move the needle a little bit, right, by doing like one-off buildings. Yes, those will help, but looking at off-site construction, mass production, looking at standardized systems that could be scaled, that could be replicable in other parts of the country and in the world, I think that's where the real positive changes can come from.
Well, it's cool to see just the amount of brain power it takes, collaboration, partnership, the nuance of like really working hard to try and solve a problem. Genuinely, that's what comes across. It's just this. It isn't a hey, here's an opportunity to make a buck. It's we have this issue, and how do we solve it? And how do we solve it in a way that's a positive outcome for everyone involved? So it's inspiring to see and to listen to that story. And we hope all the best with PathHouse.
And you just brought up partnerships, because I think we're at this state, Jake, in our country where we're all a bit of deer in the headlights. We're all, historically, my profession has been pretty hard, because when you go try to do something, mostly people are trying to say no to it when you're building in this country. But now all of a sudden people are saying yes to it, because they all realize we have a crushing housing crisis and a crushing climate change crisis. So it's an all hands on deck moment that we're all, and you can feel that. You can feel that in the air. It's an optimism to find a solution that I have not seen in my previous 35 years of working. Marcia Fudge, the Secretary of HUD, Housing and Urban Development, is one of the largest organizations in the American government, and I think what's fascinating is her invitation to both PathHouse as well as I think 40 other innovators is really because I think she realizes, as does our whole country, is that the system is somewhat shattered. And we keep throwing the same money at the same resources and keep expecting different outcomes, which I've heard is the definition of insanity. And exactly, just doing the same thing. And so I think she's realizing that as our country faces this massive destabilizing crisis of a severe lack of housing, we've got to start throwing completely new ideas at the equation. When people don't have stable housing, kind of to our earlier discussion, it undermines the entire government. When people don't have a safe place to live, a lockable front door, when they're living under bridges or on their parents' basement floor, it starts to undermine really what it is to be an American, what it is to trust the government, what it is to get up and work kind of a fruitful, wholesome life each day when you're struggling to even find a place to put your head. And I think the interesting paradox is that people are thinking it's just a homeless, houseless crisis that we see around the country, and people see people living under bridges and people kind of wandering around with drug addiction. But really the crisis goes all the way up to college-educated students. So they have a college degree, they graduate making $80,000 a year, they can't find housing. So this is the entire spectrum all the way up to probably above $100,000 a year of income where people can't afford housing.
That's crazy.
We're really at this place in the country where it's completely broken, and we've got to throw away most of what we know about creating housing and come up with a new way to do it. And whether that's through the innovations that are on this mall or something we haven't discovered, I think that's what she's after, that's what we're all after, and that's what really the country needs to, and it's urgent to hold itself together. In the 80s, when I was back in junior high and high school, because that was when the focus on if you're not going to college, something's wrong with you. And that was really when they started to taper and then close down all these vocational education kind of aspects of high school and kind of the trades unions, kind of apprenticeships after high school. And I think commensurate with that, what was happening on the West Coast in the early 80s was the timber wars. So under Clinton, and this was, not the intent, of course, but under the Clinton Northwest Forest Act, the spotted owl and old growth forests came into play as an environmentalist way to raise capital. So environmentalists kind of won that battle, not kind of, they really did win that battle, and we shuttered over 2,300 mills on the West Coast.
That's crazy.
And when we did that as a country, I think what was happening is that that part of the country, and then I think it spread into other parts of the blue-collar labor force, realized that our country thought there were other things more important than them. So spotted owls are more important than them and their children, and same with old-growth trees. And when in fact that those were our original environmentalists, people who were loggers and mill owners, they knew more about forests than you and I will ever know. They maintain them, they replant, they're hunters, they're fishermen. And so they were really kind of more knowledgeable about our forests than the elitist environmental groups voting them essentially out of business. I do, and I think we need as a country to pull those red and blue back because we're all after the same thing. A little better education for our kids, food on the table, and a safe, warm place to sleep. We're all after the same thing. So let's just realize that and realize the importance again of blue collar is absolutely equal to white collar. So, and I think that's the way to recover.
My real hope is that youth start to see both the construction industry and the manufacturing industry as a strong option, right? Like let's stop saying if you don't go to college, go into construction. Let's stop saying if you don't go to college, get into manufacturing. If that's your choice and you want to do it and you want to have a high sense of pride in the work that you do and to be able to point to that work that you're a part of every day, that's what I think this could stand for.
It's so fascinating to me just that so much rides on the narrative, like people when they say, hey, you're using wood, we're going to clear these forests. They have this like picture of these old growth trees. And part of me loves, that's the challenge of cross laminated timber and mass timber, is that hey, there's a more nuanced story that we have to tell and talk about.
Right, that's right.
That ends up being beneficial for all. And I think I'm always surprised at like just the layers to it. And so I think it's a huge piece to.
I got to meet with a couple of our congressmen today, and we had a Democrat and we had a Republican,
so
and
good.
it was really unique to see this total bipartisanship.
I will not believe it till I see it.
I couldn't believe it. I was shocked, and I had to point it out. And I think that people, this is hopefully an opportunity to bring us together. That's what my hope is.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I want to see.
Yeah.